the time matters. The time that it actually occurs really matters. So, let's say, as I've used in that engineering example before, that your downtime occurs right before a bid is due and you're putting a bid in for $1 million worth of work and you miss out on that bid deadline because you were down during that bid period. So that cost could be $1 million in potential lost revenue.
You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. I'm Sherry Lip, the marketing manager at Stimulus Technologies, and I am here with Stimulus Technologies CEO Nathan Whitaker. And today we are going to be talking about what downtime can really mean for your business. So we might be doing a little downtime math. Welcome, Nathan.
Pull out your notebooks and pencils. We'll we'll try to figure this out together.
So to get started, what do you think a lot of business owners may not realize about downtime? Like, why are we doing a little math here?
Well, I think the first thing, I think there's an expectation from business owners that IT never goes down, or it really doesn't affect business if it goes down, or a quick call to my IT provider and then suddenly they can get me back up online in a few minutes. And business owners that I talk to don't realize the the total cost that being down, their IT infrastructure being down can cost a business, and potentially extended downtime. We don't deal with this as much today as we did a couple of years ago, but a ransomware event can potentially take a business down for weeks. So that calculation adds up, really quickly, what the total cost for downtime is. So I think the business owners often have a misconception on the total cost to downtime just because of that.
And how might downtime be defined differently for different businesses? I mean, I've certainly experienced times when there's been a technological glitch or a power outage and nothing really happened and we kept working. But how might downtime affect different businesses?
So we categorize downtime two different ways. In when a customer calls us up with issues, we rate them critical or high. Usually, something that goes in as critical is affecting a large swath of their employees or their staff. So that could mean maybe a line of business application going down. So maybe your point of sale system, or if you have if you're an engineering firm, your engineering software going down, maybe a server taking down multiple applications, or everybody, all your data is encrypted and nobody can work at all because nothing's accessible. So it could affect just one group of individuals, but company wide, or it could affect the ability to run for the whole company. And then a high issue from a downtime perspective is maybe one user, or a smaller application. They can still work on some things, but maybe they can't work on what they really want to, or one user is completely down, like a laptop crashes or something like that. So I think what for this discussion we're talking about more of a critical failure where an application, a line of business application goes down, or your entire system gets ransomwared so that you have no access to anything. Maybe all your emails go down. I mean, that's an important part of business communication. All your email systems are encrypted or corrupted, that you can't communicate with the outside world. So those events are rather catastrophic to businesses, especially in critical deadlines. For example, I was talking to an engineering firm the other day, and I was asking them this question: is what systems could be highly detrimental to your business if they went down? And they have an estimating system they use for estimating jobs, and some days it might not be as big a deal if that estimating system goes down, but if it goes down an hour before a bid deadline that's due and they can't get that bid in because application isn't accessible, then that's a critical issue because, once that deadline passes, if it's due at, 5 p.m. on Friday, at 5:01, it's no longer accepted by most, government or bidding engagements. So, that could lose a multi-million dollar job if they don't have access to that data. So it becomes more critical at different points in time and more costly potentially at different points in time. But the idea is what can we do to keep it up and running, near 100% of the time? And that's what we have to resolve with business owners, and how much effort and expense we put into those systems to actually protect and keep the business up and running, or those critical systems up and running near 100% of the time.
What are the biggest causes of downtime? Maybe some that people don't think of besides like a cyber attack.
Well, cyber attack is certainly one that's on top of people's minds. A vendor being down. So a lot of business applications now are cloud hosted. So for example, about a year ago, there was a system that was used by over 10,000 car dealerships that went offline for over 30 days because they had a cyber attack. But the cyber attack didn't affect the dealerships directly, but indirectly, it took down the system that they were using and all their data. So it could be a vendor going offline, for different reasons. It could be corruption of data. Maybe data is deleted off of the server. It could be that ransomware event, like what we were talking about before, that data is encrypted and held at ransom. But there's other IT issues that could happen. Your hardware on your server could go down if you're running your applications internally, which a lot of companies still do. So you could have hardware failure. You could have network failure, like a network switch or firewall that goes offline. So there's a lot of things that can take an entire system offline, and some of them are mitigated. If your internet service in your office goes offline, there's maybe backups that we can put in place. Um, there may be redundant hardware we have to put in place, but overall, we're looking at whether it's vendors, uh, cyber attacks, or things that we've been dealing with for 50 years now, is hardware failures is often common too.
And what do we see most often at stimulus for causing downtime?
The two that we see most often is hardware failure, and some type of cyber event. And then third is the upstream, the provider going down. So those are the three that we see more often. And again, like I mentioned, there's ways to protect against all three. And honestly, a cloud hosted application by a vendor is the hardest one to solve for. But hardware failure, cyber attacks, those are the easier ones because we have a little bit more control over them inside the environment. The harder one is the systems we don't have control over.
How often are cyber attacks happening? Is it not necessarily always that you're getting ransomware and your system is held hostage? Are there other types of attacks that are going to affect a system?
Yeah, certainly, there's ransomware is one of the worst because they do encrypt most of your data and hold the data at ransom until you pay that. But there are other cyber attacks. There's corruption of data, deletion of data, that occurs. But a lot of cyber attacks that happen a lot is something maybe for larger businesses is what's called the denial of service attack is common, and I write about that in the book. That a hacker ring or a disgruntled vendor employee can hire uh, a company that's of hackers, a group of hackers, to attack another system through what's called denial of service attack. And what that does is they just flood the traffic of a website or a system so much that the servers become unresponsive and they can't, offer any additional service to other customers. And so if you run like a website with a web front store or something like that, or a hosted application that customers are using a denial of service attack or distributed denial of service attack is pretty common for more larger businesses, especially that are doing a lot of online retailing, that we see those still. What we're from a downtime perspective, I think what we're trying to protect against is, data deletion, hardware failure, systems going offline because of some type of failure or, data loss that we're trying to prevent.
So that leads me to my next thought is how much can a small amount of downtime, how much repercussion can that have? How far reaching can that be for a business?
Yeah, I think what we have to do to calculate what the costs really are is understand what it takes to operate a business for, let's say, an hour of time. So, let's say, your business that brings in about $100,000 of revenue a month, and there's call it just for simple math, 22 working days in the month. So we would take $100,000 times or divided by 22 working days. So I'm going to pull up my little handy calculator here and do your math. So it's about call it $4,545 a day divided by 8 hours a day. So you're looking, potentially $100,000 a month business in revenue. You would lose in an hour's time roughly $568 in sales. But I think the time matters. The time that it actually occurs really matters. So, let's say, as I used in that engineering example before, that your downtime occurs right before a bid is due, and you're putting a bid in for $1 million worth of work, and you miss out on that bid deadline because you were down during that bid period. So that cost could be $1 million in potential lost revenue. So the time that it occurs, I think, is just as important as how long it occurs too, or the exact moment that it occurs. Um, and then, we're talking about revenue, but there's also, lost reputation, maybe future lost business. So, potentially that $568 per hour could be 2 to 3 times that cost because, there's repercussions on how long it takes you to get back up and running and potential future lost business because, it was down during that short period of time. It could be, future hours. So, if you run a retail store, for example, and you can't run any transactions for a couple hours, you may not have customers that come back for a day or two, or they might not come back at all in the future because they think, well, you can't run my transaction today. How are you going to run it in the future properly? So you know, that's additional calculations you have to take um, into that math.
How can business owners, what steps can they take to keep something from getting bigger, kind of mitigate a problem?
So one of the things I think you have to have a conversation with your IT provider is identifying these critical areas of where things could cause major outages. So, for example, if you run a lot of transactions that require internet service, some one thing that you would want to do is to mitigate it is having redundant internet connections. So you would have maybe you have fiber optic internet service in your building, and that's your primary connection, but you might want to bring in fixed wireless as a completely different type of service into your building, and you have redundancy there. So if you're critical on being able to run transactions over the internet, for example, credit card transactions, that's a critical part of your business at a retail location. Having redundant internet, I think, is pretty essential. Then, the next question is like, how do you provide redundancy in your hardware? Maybe you're a business that one day of downtime is okay. Um, so what you'd want to do is make sure that you have a contract on your server to have next business day support from the manufacturer of your server. So if you have a Dell or HP server, you can buy either same day or next business day support for your server that you can get parts in immediately. So if you have a power supply failure or motherboard failure, they'll bring those parts in immediately. Then the next question is like how if a day is not good enough, you can't be down for a day. How do you mitigate that? Then you put in redundancy, redundant hardware. So you look at having what we call like a BDR appliance on site. So that's a business data recovery appliance that replicates your server every few hours to another server. And then if the primary server has a hardware failure or some type of ransomware attack or data deletion or whatever it may be, data corruption, that you can get up and running. You might lose a few hours of data, maybe if even just a few minutes of data, but you could be up and running within 15 to 30 minutes of time if you have a fully redundant server in-house. Then the question is if you have like a theft or fire or something that causes that hardware to go down, you want to make sure that replicates offsite automatically so you can get up and running offsite if that happens. And in my book, I tell a story about, you know, 25 years ago, we had a client early on that had some disgruntled employees that came in and stole what they thought were their primary servers. Um, and we had redundant servers in another room that they didn't know about, and we had them up and running the next morning because we had redundancy. And we do that, today often for businesses that have that critical need of, I can't be down for more than 15 to 30 minutes. But it really does start with a conversation with your IT provider to understand, okay, if I have this bad thing happen to this system, how long is it going to take to get back up and running? And the answer may really surprise you as a business owner. It might be, well, there's no server store and you're down the street and you're out of warranty on the server. So it takes an average of 7 to 10 days to get a new server in and another 2 days to reconfigure it. So you could be down for 2 weeks if you don't have that redundancy in place or have that warranty in place. So it's so important that you have that conversation because that amount of downtime, the real time to recovery, is so much bigger than I think business owners really realize. And so having that conversation, what are the all the possibilities of failure, and then what is your comfort level as a business owner of time to recovery, and then if the actual time to recovery that your IT provider tells you is going to be is different than that, then you have to put in something else in place to mitigate that difference.
And how often do business owners need to be thinking about their server? I know we told a story about, a dead server, and sometimes people don't want to update that.
Yeah, so servers, we generally recommend 5 to 7 year replacements on servers. Most manufacturers will warrant servers up to 7 years. But once you start getting into that, 5 to 7 year range, really need to start thinking about replacing it, and certainly don't let it go beyond 7 years. Really, a couple of things you get up against is most of your server hardware has what's called a mean time between failure. So there are mechanical parts inside the servers, and they basically give a lifespan, and that 7 years is kind of that mean time between failure. That's kind of the average time that you start having hardware failures on servers. And then the second thing is your operating system has a lifespan too. So if you're running, I was talking to one of our engineers the other day, server 2016 is Windows Server 2016 is really commonly deployed out there, but that's reaching end of life. And so if you had a server that was deployed, 7 years ago, most likely it's running Windows Server 2016. And, we need to replace the server and upgrade the operating system to something more modern. So you have those two issues. You have, Microsoft, and all, operating system providers have a end of life of the operating system that they will no longer provide security updates and patches for it. And you really need to replace it before there. And then again, the hardware side, you want to replace it before you hit that mean time between failure of your hard drives, your solid state drives, your fans inside the server. All of those have lifespans on them.
So can you kind of quickly go over or briefly go over what our assessment entails as far as this kind of stuff goes? Because keeping track of server life and stuff is part of what we do.
So one of the things that we do for our clients is run a hardware report. We discuss it with our clients quarterly. So we have software that analyzes, the hardware, the operating systems on all your systems to ensure that your warranties are up to date, and can provide quotes for extended warranties. B, it looks at the operating system to see what's up to date. And one of the other things we're running up against this October is Windows 11, or sorry, Windows 10 is end of life, and so we're having to upgrade to Windows 11. And there's a lot of machines that aren't capable of running Windows 11, so that's a big replacement that we have to do for clients is replacing those older desktops. And so our software will give a report to um, our clients so that they can anticipate those. Automating it is really important because it's something, it's hard to do. Time flies, it's amazing how fast things go. Hey, I just installed that server last year, and then you pull out, oh yeah, we installed it 7 years ago, and people don't realize how fast time goes by. So, getting that report automated so that we can have those conversations and budget for them at the right time is essential.
So would you say that having all these things in place, not only it's an investment in the company, but does it save the company money in the long run?
It's very simple to calculate. You go back to that calculator and say, okay, if it costs me, call it 3 times $600 an hour, so it's $1,800 an hour, and I'm down for 10 days. That's a quick calculation on the money lost of an extended outage. So let's see, let's do that math, real quick and see if you can beat me. So $1,800 times 10 days, so that's $18,000. Certainly the cost of redundant server is quickly paid for by that downtime. And again, it could be much larger than that depending on when it happens. So, these things really pay for themselves, and it's something that you got to do before it goes down. That's always the worst call is somebody calls us up and says, I had all this stuff put in place and then we got ransomware. Can you come in and fix it for me? Our IT provider can't fix it. Can you come in and fix it for us? And a lot of times, it's you really can't. If it's you got to pay the ransom, or we send hard drives out for data recovery, which is an option. But all that is much more costly. So an ounce of prevention is worth what is the saying? An ounce of prevention is worth terrible, but I can't remember.
We'll look that up.
Yeah, an
uh,
ounce of prevention is worth something. A lot more than uh but yeah, certainly, spending the time to mitigate these issues and having those conversations is far worth the effort.
and final question: how can somebody know or find out if their IT provider? How do we assure our customers that we are prepared for to help them with this downtime?
So we automate checking for failures. I mean, that's the biggest thing is you can do things like tabletop exercises periodically. Those are required by some compliance standards. So you run through these scenarios and see what you know what what you would do. Make sure you have policies in place to overcome them. And then the other thing is automate checking these redundant systems. So for example, our BDR system that we use for redundant servers, every time there's a copy of that data, it turns on that other server and opens up a ticket to say, okay, well, we turned on the server. Here's a screenshot of it booting up successfully, and then shuts it off. And then if it doesn't boot up successfully, if it doesn't get to that login prompt in that replicated server, then it opens up a ticket so that we can solve it. Because the worst thing that can happen is you think you have all this in place and you don't. And then when it really does happen, then it becomes catastrophic. And then even worse, you thought you had redundancy in place and it didn't work. So making sure that you're checking the systems and having those discussions periodically with your IT provider. And if we're your IT provider, bring it up with your account manager. Say how, when's the last time, you protected our system, you showed that we could do a successful backup and restore, and have that conversation with them, because that makes a big difference to allow you to sleep at night, not worrying about these things.
All right. Well, thanks, Nathan. That's good information. And we got to do a little math this morning. Morning for us right now while we're recording this. And if you calculated your hourly costs, let us know if you were surprised by your number. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, Sherry, and thanks everybody for joining us today.